Welcome everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Simon. I am the program manager over at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives at FIU, and it is my pleasure to be moderating, hosting, or co-hosting this conversation that we're having today called Equity Challenges in Miami, How You Can Make a Difference. This event is part of the 10 days of connection. So for those of you who are not familiar with this initiative, is led by Radical Partners, and it aims to connect people in Miami for the first 10 days of May. So today is actually the last day of 10 days of connection. And we host conversations to build bridges, to build empathy, to close the divide on topics, and to just come together to look at the challenges in our communities, at the opportunities in our communities, and to be able to build a better Miami. So I'm super excited to be a part of this initiative and to have the support of Radical Partners throughout the process of putting together this event. I also have the pleasure of introducing today's panelists. We have Rozeena Taylor, who is the program manager of FIU's Office of Social Justice and Inclusion. Hi, Rozeena. Thank you so much for being here today. We also have Kemy Joseph, who is the CEO and co-founder of F.E.A.R.S Advantage, and who is an excellent community partner. Hi, Kemy. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this panel is also going to be presented by FIU's Global Learning Student Board. So the students who provide a voice to the work we do, who advise us, and to inform the programs that we host at the office, they'll be here sharing with you exciting initiatives. So without further ado, let me introduce the members of the Global Learning Student Board. We have Camila Castillo, International Relations major, Liana Sain, International Business and Logistics and Supply Chain Management major. Hi, Liana. We have Melanie Himeli, Biological Sciences major, and Quincy Gordon Jr., Liberal Studies major. Hi, Quincy. Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to hear you share with everybody what you're up to in terms of the work around equity. I also want to introduce Rozeena Taylor. Let me see, Rozeena, if I'm able to bring you to the spotlight so people can see you. Let me see. I hope I did that. I'm not sure, but I tried. Yes. So Rozeena Taylor is a program manager with the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion. She attended the University of South Florida, where she earned a bachelor's in biological anthropology. Is back in the classroom at FIU preparing to apply for clinical psychology doctoral programs. She has been in this position at FIU for 6 months and enjoys supporting students' academic and advocacy goals. Hi, Rozeena, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Next, we have Kemy Joseph. So now I'm gonna try to do this, so bear with me. I'm gonna try to spotlight. I'm gonna replace the spotlight. Let me see, can you all see Kemy? Yes, awesome. So Kemy is the CEO and co-founder of F.E.A.R.S Advantage. He is on a mission to help 5 million business leaders advance equity in their organizations by 2030. To create companies where people of all backgrounds can work safely and thrive. Kemy helps purpose-driven business executives leverage equity as a pathway to prosperity, effectively lead their diverse teams through conflicts involving race, politics, and privilege. Thank you, Kemy, for being here today. And now, it is my pleasure to turn it over to the Global Learning Student Board. This student board has been working really hard on an initiative all on their own. They came up with this idea on what they wanted to focus for the next year in terms of equity. And so I don't want to say too much because I want to leave it up to them, but I do want to mention that this this is a project that is in progress. So some of what you'll see today is a draft of what they're ideating and thinking about and brainstorming through, and it's something that they'll be able to implement in the next academic year. So with that, I'm gonna stop talking and turn it over to the student board.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Imeli. Like Jenny said, I am so happy that you're here with us today, witnessing this moment as we come together in favor of education, improvement, and advancement. So Jenny spoke to us about 10 days of connection and proposed that we could join. And of course, as the student board for global learning, we thought that this was a great opportunity to unite forces and foster the very reason that we came together in the first place. So after having a discussion, we decided that equity was a good topic to address, since most of us learned about what equity really meant during our college years. So we thought that one way to bridge the divide in our community was introducing these topics at an early age to our youth, in hopes that in the future they will feel motivated to join and contribute to the work of organizations like our partners joining us today. So again, thank you for being here with us. And if I could please ask you during this meeting at any time, during the end, whenever you have a chance, to fill out a survey that will take you 5 minutes, and I will post it in the chat. And I am done talking. I will turn it over to my partner.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, my name is Liana Sine. So as we all know, Miami is a city that's admired for its diversity and opportunity, but that doesn't mean there are not major areas for improvement. So for one example, a Miami Herald article that came out in 2019 said that by a standard measure of economic inequality, Miami-Dade County has the second biggest gap in the nation, with only New York rating worse, which places Miami Metro's score on the Gini coefficient for inequality on par with Panama and Colombia. So while Miami is taking steps towards more fair and equitable share of opportunity in recent years, there's still clearly a lot to be done and a lot of demand for action by residents of Miami. So as the Global Learning Student Board for FIU, we believe that it's important to be educated on these issues and possible solutions while providing this education to others, so we can all play our part in having a brighter future for current and upcoming generations.
Good afternoon. My name is Quincy Gordon. So we decided to tackle equity and its relationship to education, housing, and health in the Miami area. We thought it was important to address some of these disparities within these topics, how they interconnect, and the importance of being aware of these issues in a digestible way that young folks can understand. Hence, we're developing a video series that addresses education, housing, and health in a fun and exciting way to spread awareness by reaching out and partnering with local schools to get the youth engaged.
Kemy, are you ready to share the video?
No, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna speak a little bit first. I just couldn't get to my unmute button. I am Camila Castillo, and the objective that we had with this video was to provide the tools for teachers to start a conversation around equity in the classroom. We are working on creating partnerships with different schools, teachers, and organizations, so that we can get into the school, the whole K to 12 school community, and we can show this video throughout this next year, the next school year, in different kind of platforms, maybe allowing students to have a conversation after, or creating different type of activities that can guide them to create the thought or create like the custom. It's important to say for us that producing this video was not easy, as any of us are designing or animation majors, but with our creativity and our teamwork, we find out to make this awesome draft we are about to see. That's why it's also super important for us to create future partnerships with other students that are creatives and that have more expertise in these areas of designing, animation, and more like that. Still, creating this was super fun. I am a creative person, so I really enjoyed it. The video you're about to see is inspired in the background, is inspired in a Miami afternoon, and the characters are especially designed to be different and to promote that diversity and different types of personalities. As Jenny said, is still a draft. So if you have any feedback or any comments that you want, please let us know. We'll in the survey for sure there will be a thing for comments, or if not, you can contact us. We'll provide the info at the end. So now I'm gonna share the video. This is exciting. I'm gonna stop sharing the one that's share sound. Okay, let me put that. Ready.
Hey, what are you up to?
Nothing much. Just chilling here before next period.
Hey Aria, we missed you at the chess club yesterday.
Sorry I couldn't make it. So, I heard we're doing a Socratic seminar on equity and different aspects of our lives next class.
Really? Oh man, I don't think I have much to elaborate on that topic.
Wait. What is equity? I've never heard that word before. It sounds like equality. Isn't it the same thing?
No, there's a difference. Basically, equality means that people receive the same resources, but equity means that people receive resources based on their needs. I learned the differences like this. Picture a tree and two people, one short and the other tall. They are trying to reach the apples on the tree. Equality would be giving both people a ladder of the same size. While equity would be giving the short person a bigger ladder that would allow them to reach the tree at the same height the tall person would. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think I get it. But wait, what aspects of our life would equity affect?
Well, education, I guess. Equity affects us in the classroom.
Well, it looks like Aria has her topic. I wonder what everyone else will talk about.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kemy, and the rest of the team. And I think you all mentioned it, but I just wanted to mention again, this is going to be a video series. So the students will create one short video specifically on education. That's why we share some of those stats, statistics before that we're going to be using in the videos. They're going to create one around housing, one around, what's the other one?
Education and health.
Those three, and then create the guiding questions to provide the tools to the teachers. So it's not only the videos, but also the teachers will have questions to spark the conversation. So as you can tell, I'm really proud of them for taking the first step, and they'll be working on this over the summer. So, and they really want your feedback in terms of not only the design, but any other ideas that they should be thinking about. Thank you so much, you all, for sharing. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rozeena to learn more about what's available at FIU for our students in terms of equity and the challenges that we have in Miami. Rozeena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. That was a great video that really encapsulated a lot of those difficult concepts that are hard for us to have conversations about in a way that I think you said grade schoolers will be able to access and begin to have those really important, big ideas about. I'm going to take a second to share my screen and pull up a brief presentation that I made about our office. All right, is this visible to everyone? Okay, so there's no sound or anything. So if you think you're missing anything, it is not a super comprehensive, wonderful cartoon like we just watched. It's just a little PowerPoint. All right, so as was mentioned earlier, I work in the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion, right? And, okay, let me make sure that my volume is appropriate for everybody. Give me just a second. I'm just going to fix my audio really quickly. Thank you for your patience. All right, cool. Is everybody able to hear me? Yeah? Okay, thank you. All right. So the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion is a transformative office in a number of ways. So primarily, one, we really literally just made a change, and we used to be the Multicultural Programs and Services Office. Some of y'all might be familiar with some of the initiatives out of there. We administer some scholarships. We support marginalized students through a bunch of different academic resources. And we've begun to have some really important conversations across the campus regarding social justice themes and awareness, right? So we recently took a turn towards doing that much more exclusively and more intentionally, which is signaled by our name, right? So we now changed to the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion to better encapsulate some of the services that our office now provides. So what we do is we empower social change, we advocate for diversity and inclusion, we educate for justice and equity, and we act with empathy and impact. And we partner with a lot of campus and external community partners to bring some really great events, opportunities, resources to students and from students to the community. All right. Okay, so here was a great letter that was sent out at the beginning of the spring semester indicating this change and the things that we hope to be able to bring to our campus partners and students. Just a couple of pictures of us. So we are comprised of a number of sub-initiatives or offices, including the Women's Center. Now the Pride Center used to be just LGBTQIA initiatives. Now it's the Pride Center to, again, encompass a broader community and be more accessible. And we put on a lot of events, have a lot of programming that's around these different themes. What I do is I organize a lot of presentations about these social justice themes, one of which being equality, equity, access, liberation, and justice, right? So we focus a lot about, oh, I see there's an internship at the Women's Center. Okay, good for you. You're gonna be able to access some great information and work with some really impactful femmes and allies that'll be really well-rounded for you. Okay, moving on. Okay, here are some of our values, promoting multiculturalism. This is some of our traditional ideals that have blended into our new mission and vision statement, just showing you some of the ways that we've changed. And then, too quickly. All right, so we offer an array of programming and services to kind of back up the things that we're always talking about. So like I said, we offer scholarships to students. They are merit-based, and we also have a few that are, again, aimed at equity. So they support students who come from marginalized backgrounds, folks that maybe would be underrepresented or wouldn't have the opportunity to pay for this educational experience. We have a social justice badge where we bring in experts on different concepts like disability, civil rights. We offer tutoring. I administer some trainings about diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as creating consistently presentations that we deliver to students, staff, faculty, anyone really, about anything from keeping yourself safe in a protest to learning about the ins and outs of feminism. So we're constantly offering those presentations for people to get these kinds of introductory conversations started and then taking them into the communities of choice. So it could be y'all and GL having these conversations. You want to get up to speed about things. You want to begin conversations. Some of them, unfortunately, happen when we have instances in academia or in employment, and we need to kind of inform folks that some behaviors and some manners of speech are just inappropriate for where we're trying to go into this multicultural future that we've envisioned for ourselves. We have a male mentoring initiative. We supported the recent campus legislation. I wouldn't call it legislation, but it's a campaign to allow folks who maybe are gender non-binary or trans in order to go by the names that they prefer and have that reflect on their actual campus records. We always have our annual MLK celebration. Need I say more, usually a service project, a host of conferences from everything from social justice to the Women Who Lead conference, all housed within our office now. Oh, thank you for dropping the link here. Yeah, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion and the many, many things we're consistently doing and partnering with others to do, we'd love to work with anyone on the board if that's something that you're interested in, and just connecting students to what they can do. I recently launched a program for undergraduate students called Student Ambassadors, and they exclusively learn and master these concepts and then just administer them to their student communities. So they're going to be working this summer and in the fall to probably be putting on a lot of these presentations, because I think it's valuable to hear from me because I'm super cool and not terribly old. But it's also really important to hear from people who might be in your classrooms, who might be in your study groups. And, you know, maybe if you feel a little bit more comfortable asking those questions and getting involved in that way, then they're there for you. So you'll be seeing them across campus and in our digital spaces as well. I think I'm going to relinquish the rest of my time. Thank you so much for taking a second to listen to me. Again, if you're interested in anything that OSJI has to offer, please check out our website. And I'm also going to really quickly drop my email in the chat if anything I said seems interesting to you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rozeena, so much. And for those of you who are Global Learning Medallion students, some of the programs that Rozeena is mentioning will be counting for points towards the Global Learning Medallion program. So if you're involved with the office in the Ambassadors program or any other activities, let me know and we can make sure to grant those points as well. You know, always the plug for the medallion. And now let me turn it over to Kemy Joseph. We're so excited to have you here. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for having me and for putting together such an amazing program. It's glad to be following Rozeena and then hearing the students. And I also have a background in film and theater, so I appreciate y'all doing a creative video to help more young people learn about equity in these issues, especially to be having this at an earlier and earlier age. So again, as was mentioned, my name is Kemy Joseph. I am the CEO and co-founder of F.E.A.R.S Advantage. And just to give you a snapshot for us, F.E.A.R.S Advantage means fuel extraordinary actions, relationships, and systems. So we're always thinking about how to take a more creative or more inclusive approach to things that will push people away. For example, their fears will cause people to avoid issues or to avoid this conversation around DEI altogether. Do me a favor in the chat, type a problem that you've been able to solve by avoiding it. Just go ahead, anybody. Let's see if we got any takers. We put this challenge out to anybody we can. Type a problem in the chat that you've been able to solve by avoiding it. We have yet to find an answer. Some people can talk about things that they can push aside and they don't solve them. They become bigger and bigger issues. So we're kind of catching equity, diversity, equity, inclusion as a conversation for those of us who are just now getting involved. This has been an issue that's been building up for quite a long time, especially as people keep pushing it aside, and we're seeing more and more public displays of inequity, and also having more people awoken to the issues that are actually happening in our country as well as in the world as a whole. So it's important for us that we have to have a perspective that's positive, that's approachable, that's actionable, and even enjoyable. Imagine if more people could enjoy conversations around DEI. Growing up, I did not enjoy those conversations. It really oftentimes felt forced upon me, or felt that I, as a one minority in a room, that I had to then be someone who speaks on behalf of all Black people, or I'm Haitian, so on behalf of all Haitian people. And those things really created much more division and frustration for me. So as we step into this conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, we really want to make sure that we do things a little bit differently. And because of that, we have really been seeking to understand how people define DEI, whether that's youth, whether that's adults, or whether that's people in organizations. We predominantly work with small to large businesses, because we see that career equity, which I'll show you in a moment, is a pathway to a lot of prosperity in the world. Like we saw what happened with COVID when people lost their jobs. We saw how much it affected almost every other aspect of their lives. So it's really an affirmation for us that if we can work improving the workplace and making sure it's a place where people can work safely and thrive in honor of their backgrounds, that we can truly raise up the status of people across the world. So that's our mission. It's a pretty big one, but that just kind of gives you a background about who I am and what we're up to. The main thing I want to share with you today is talking about let us break apart equity to make it more manageable. Because although we've seen quite a bit of images displaying the difference between equality and equity, like the ladder metaphor, or sometimes people have seen a picture of a gate and people trying to watch the baseball game. When you start to really break down what does equity look like for an individual, most times people will just have a corrupt Google search, right? We don't actually have an image of what it looks like for someone to be truly empowered, especially if we're only looking at it in a very mixed or kind of congested way. So for us, we decided to break apart equity into what we're calling equity pathways. Now, you'll see them load across the bottom of the screen. So we have mental health and mental health equity, family equity, social and relational equity, spiritual equity, or religious equity, housing equity, environmental equity, educational equity, economic equity, career equity, legal equity, and governmental equity. So we're saying if we start talking about equity and we're not distinguishing them like this, we're trying to then conflate them all together. So just at the top, I'd love to offer you all these equity pathways. And as I'm going through them, I really want you to pay attention to which one of these pathways are you most responsible for. So for example, an organization like FIU is providing educational equity. At the same time, FIU also employs people, so it'd be providing career equity. So it's important that you start to pay attention to where your organization truly is, and it allows you to then start to take action, because in every one of these pathways, you have to provide people with awareness of what's available, access to those resources, opportunity to be a part of those communities, to be a part of that pathway, the safety for them to actually be able to participate in honor of their backgrounds, the sense of belonging, that we actually honor who they are and give them a chance to customize this pathway for them, the resources to be able to do this, including the funding to be able to have equity, the development which is going with the learning and the training that they need to be successful, the advancement so they can have leadership in these different pathways, as well as the autonomy to operate in the way that makes the most sense for them, and the ability to leave a legacy, the ability to truly pass on the growth and the fruits of their labor to others who look like them, who are similar identities and different. So we'd say, as we're focusing on this, for us working in the business world, we're focusing on career equity, saying that every single employer has to provide this for their employees. And this is how we start to help people say, oh man, this is what I have to do. This is what I'm actually required to do by law within my organization. Depending on what else my organization does, I may also have to focus in other areas. As I mentioned, FIU would be providing career equity for all their staff, as well as for the people who are on their payroll. And then we have educational equity as a part of that as well. And then we, depending on other aspects of what FIU is doing as an organization, we'll have other missions that also are helping in these other aspects or these other pathways of equity. So far, so good. Anybody's mind's like blown, right? It's like, for us, just breaking this apart was like, it was a eye-opener. It also helped me to understand that when we're doing our work in the business space, we could do almost everything in our power. We can do almost everything right and still not prevent police violence. And that's just something that breaks my heart, and also something that focuses my attention and say, okay, if our goal as an organization is to help people increase career equity, we're helping them see that by increasing career equity, you're oftentimes giving more people the resources, education, and ability to do well in the other pathways of their lives as well. But for any organization, if we want to get more involved in the legal system, we're also seeing not only do we have to get involved in the pathway here, the pathways are at the bottom, then we have to look at what access points are we getting involved in order to truly make a difference where we can make a difference. So for us, we're also understanding with career equity that if somebody stunts the growth of another individual in their organization, they can also stunt the growth in these other pathways. For example, if you're only making minimum wage for your whole life, how could you ever get the development and other resources that you need to actually be able to advance your house or your even advance your family? So we're helping people see how these are tied together, and especially with how tense these issues are, helping people really focus on where they have the greatest influence to make an impact sooner than later. Because if we're only waiting for our young people to be the ones to make a difference, and we'll be waiting for a long time. I know it's not what y'all are saying. I'm just like making sure the adults in the room hear me super clear. Anywhere you have the ability to make an influence, you are a leader. And for us, it's about helping to clarify where people have influence so they focus their attention and can actually see the impact. Because in equity, one of the things we are also finding is that one of the greatest ways to empower people is to point them in the right direction of where they can use their influence to make a difference, and that way they can see that their power, their privilege can actually make a positive difference for them and other people. So that's the short version of this conversation around equity pathways, in order to really ask us, where do we have the influence and that we can start making a difference. Again, for us as an organization, we're working on the career equity pathway. I would love for you all in the chat to just put the pathway that you're working on. And some of y'all might be in multiple pathways. Again, the pathways are the ones here at the bottom. Put the pathway that you feel like you have the greatest influence in the chat. And that way, again, if you leave out of here just with a focus on where you can start making a difference, then you can start thinking about where on that pathway you are. But I really want you to focus on the pathway first and foremost. So go ahead and type in the chat, which pathway do you have the ability to make the greatest difference in right now? Great. Great. And a lot of us have social equity, so something to consider too. When we're talking about social equity, it's the ability for people to even have the ability to show up as themselves. And so we all have a role to play in the social equity portion. You don't have to be an internet influencer only to have that, but when you do become an internet influencer, you might be able to have more influence in that social relational portion. So great. And then again, as you are thinking about moving forward, as you start to pinpoint where in this pathway you are or you have access to, like I will tell you, in order to truly be the person to advance folks at the highest level, you have to have a high level of influence in the organization. But we tell every single person that you have the ability to provoke safety and belonging within your organizations. Whatever your position, your title is, you have the ability to help the person right next to you feel like they have a sense of safety, even if it's in your circle, your bubble, and they also have a place to belong, even if it's within your bubble. So it's important to know that even if you don't have all the power in the world, you don't need all that to make a difference for the people who are right around you. That's what true leadership is. And so as you can tell, we focus a lot on DEI leadership and what it means for us to really reinforce the practices more than the policies. The policies are helpful, but our practices bring the policies to life and can truly save people's lives if we are willing to take those steps. And I will offer you this one free resource. We have plenty, but I think the one that's most relevant for this conversation is this resource here, where we just did a free training on advancing racial equity with your privilege. So we're helping people to stop making privilege such a bad word and actually use privilege to help others. And you can find that, I can put it in the chat too, you can find that at FEARSadvantage.com/advance. And that will give you the, that will actually have a deeper dive into that graphic I just showed you, as well as introduce you to a concept called cultural equity, which is our ability to fairly and systematically advance people of all backgrounds in our organizations. So you can find all of that at FEARSadvantage.com/advance. So thank you for popping in the chat. I'll put the official link in there, but that is my time. I want to keep it on time, and I'm happy to stick around for questions, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Kemy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing the resource for all of us to take a look at. So now I love how my guest today actually stuck to the time that we had talked about, so that gives us ample time for questions. So I invite you all to take advantage of this and either type your questions in the chat or unmute yourselves and share the questions that you have with us. This is the time for you to learn more about any of the programs that we talked about today, or a chance to just share your thoughts of what you're working on when it comes to equity, if you are working on anything, right? So I'm gonna give people a minute to gather their thoughts. And maybe I'm thinking while we wait, if you want to enter in the chat, when it comes to equity in Miami, what is your major concern? Like if you had to choose one topic or one area, if you want to type it in the chat, like what comes to mind for you? Like one of the biggest challenges in Miami. Housing. Everybody so far, housing. Yeah, Laura, it is pretty bad. Educational.
I have a question for Rozeena or Kemy, and I don't expect you to have the full answer, but since housing is really the most, that like gentrification, it's growing and it's a problem that keeps going, and it doesn't seem it's gonna stop. What are some ways we could support communities that are suffering gentrification right now?
Kemy, would you like to go? I'm not volunteering you. I'm just saying I have an answer. I feel like your answer is going to be more comprehensive.
No,
so maybe
go
I'll
for
just...
it. No, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for checking.
All right. So before my time at FIU, I worked a lot in local nonprofits and education, and we had the opportunity to have a lot of really innovative conversations about gentrification, climate justice, and how those two kind of intersect. So not only are we looking at a housing inequity issue, and it's not a shortage of places to live. We have no shortage of places to put human beings in Miami. What we have is access, transparency. I'm trying not to be like overtly like burn all of it, but there's some real interesting legislative moves that benefit certain stakeholders in our communities, if I'll say it that way, right? Educating average folk on their ability to lobby and, like, I hate the phrase stand their ground, but literally maintain their like place in their communities, because they're being offered just ridiculous amounts of money in order to allow developers to develop. And that kind of speaks to what Kemy was sharing with us. When you live in a system of overlapping inequity and access, certain things like that make a lot more sense to you to give into, because you don't have a lot of other socio-political like channels for capital. You don't know enough about, what moves you can make. You don't know enough about predatory lending and things like that. And so you end up kind of in a space where you're just like, what? You're giving me $216,000 for this super poopy little house, not knowing that the value of what you're turning over could be exponentially. That's why you're being offered so much. It's why communities are being displaced. It's why whole areas just overnight turn into like ice cream and like artisanal soaps and other wonderful things that are cool for Etsy's sake, but not for like community engagement and community like investment sake. So I would say primarily if you can support nonprofits or initiatives that help to spread that awareness, help to give community members like better information and maybe utilize their rights a bit more. Initiatives that are trying to make this sort of legislation more transparent and put like public servants directly like in cahoots with community members, I would say that would be great. And if that's either like joining one, volunteering with some of those, that's something you could probably do at your level now. Like if you want to go on and become like, I don't know, a congressperson, that'd probably be really clutch, but that might not be your ministry, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes to all of that.
Yes to all that. I'm glad I let you go first. There's and everything, like that's what we're talking about here, right? When you're saying communities struggling with gentrification, it's almost like saying communities are struggling with this whole pathway right here. It's like who are you talking to? Right? So if you're helping some folks, like as was mentioned beautifully, like some of them don't even have the awareness to know they even need the rest of this. Right? So if you're trying to talk to them about some of this up here, they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I think it's really important to figure out where people are in the process. So do they need awareness of why they're getting this loan and why that loan or why that offer to buy their home is so inappropriate compared to what they can make. That's awareness. That's a huge, do they need access to more resources, or even more what's the word I'm looking for, people to help them with litigation, or things to know their actual rights and how to fight for that? Do they need opportunity to actually, if they want to sell? Some folks do want to sell, they want to improve, they just need better opportunities, right? I think that there's a lot that can be said if you go up the chain and say, what does this person I'm talking to need, knowing that with the equity conversation, as was pointed out earlier with the tree metaphor, every one of the people who are dealing with gentrification needs a different piece of the puzzle, and some of them need multiple pieces of the puzzle. Otherwise, and so it's important, as we're trying to resolve that issue, are we giving people a chance to even know that there's multiple layers in there that they might even be struggling with without knowing. And the other piece is also looking at how we're all individually contributing to this, right? There is, I was very upset with gentrification until I realized that I was also a part of it, right? Well-educated, single, like no kids. I literally take my dog to a dog groomer and buying vegan food. Wait a minute, like literally the classic version of what they say people roll into. And I live in the Grove now. If you see gentrification happening, it's like, wow, I'm also a part of it. I'm paying into it. So what am I doing to improve the community that I'm in and that I've also have displaced right there? I think there's a very real conversation for each of us to have as we are, if we're living in a community that is especially if it looks better than what we had growing up, we're like, all right, I'm a part of this problem as well. And so stop making gentrification like a big systematic thing, and like, well, how is it also my responsibility in terms of where I'm choosing to live and where I'm choosing to let my money go, and how I'm a part of those cities or those city councils if I'm paying into it as a resident. So I think there's the big conversation for what other people are struggling with, and then what's our conversation for how we're contributing to it as well.
Makes sense, having social responsibility on our actions and what we do about it. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Kemy. Any other questions? Anybody wants to type a question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, take advantage of the wealth of knowledge here in the room. Or it doesn't have to be a question. Maybe you have thoughts about equity, or you have questions. I think my usual question that I do for panelists at the very end, which I was kind of saving it, but it might provoke some thoughts here, is what's one thing, and so this is for some of the students, also for Rozeena and Kemy, one thing that the audience can do like today, right after they leave this call? Is there a step that they can take? Because I feel in my conversation with students that oftentimes there's a passion, there's a concern, and then there is this sense of being overwhelmed about it because the issue seems so big, right? How do I tackle it? And Rozeena, you mentioned programs from the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion that they can sign up for. And Kemy, you talked about the awareness piece and you talked about resources. But right now, after we get off this call, is there one thing that they could do that is easy, that makes it less daunting of a task? And also, my students, if you have some suggestions for the rest.
Not trying to do the same thing again, but that was a good layup. I'll get it and you get it in the hoop. But I think Chloe might have had a maybe related, but before this part question. So before we get into that, maybe.
Thank you so much. I do have a question. It's taken me a while to compose my thoughts on this presentation, but first I want to give props to the Global Learning Board who composed that video to educate the youth on this very important topic. I believe the earlier we start these conversations, the better. However, I really enjoy this narrative of like the ladders. And I think I've been subjected to presentations like that growing up in Florida, even with exams like the FCAT, the Florida Comprehension Test, and graduation, you know, like this idea of getting over the Black educational gap. And when I think of Miami-Dade and Broward in the education system and the disparities that have been highlighted by the pandemic, I see that, you know, I would hate for other young students, as I did, take on this initiative of being like inadequate or adopting this idea, oh, it's because I'm short, instead of emphasizing you didn't get a ladder. or your ladder was meant to tip over. I think it's a brilliant presentation, but I would like to encourage you all to like keep revising it, keep getting different perspectives, and really making sure that every young mind who is in front of that video is, I guess, empowered to continue the conversation, but certain young minds don't feel a sense of inadequacy. And I was really, I'm gonna be vulnerable here and somewhat triggered by this idea of like raising your voice with your privilege. And I think it's a good idea that we need everyone to be involved. But I guess, Mr. Kemy Joseph, I'm curious to see, is it really a matter of seeing people or having people who may be advantaged speaking more, or those who have been systematically oppressed and silenced being listened to? Like, I understand how that may bring about more sponsorship and funding, but overall, I don't know if we can address equity if we're not addressing it through a policy and legislative legal perspective. Because all of your presentation, I enjoyed, I learned so much, but I feel like all of those branches intersect, whether you're an artist, whether you're an educational output or an employer. I don't even know if that was a clear question or compliment or, yeah, but thank you for today.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate as you also mentioned about the ladders. I remember hearing from somebody, you can't ask people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps if they don't have boots to begin with. So it's important. I appreciate that you are talking and really calling it to attention, making sure that we don't adopt the lack kind of mindset that comes with like, oh, I'm short, where's my ladder? It's like, one, we have to acknowledge that our ladders, we may not have gotten the ladders, and it's also, when we do have ladder, what's our upkeep and what's our responsibility with that, and how are we framing this whole experience? I appreciate that you caught that, as most of us were just like nodding, like this is part of the reason we wanted to switch those metaphors, because there's so many. Once you try to put it into one visual, it's almost like impossible to get it right for everybody. So it's just something that I want to, as y'all are thinking about those visual videos, it's part of the reason like we just took people out of this whole conversation, because we have not found one way to represent it for everybody involved. But I think what you're also pointing out is to have a discussion about that and making sure people, that kids who are looking at that, who are short, for example, can also see it's not a bias against them, that we're encouraging that they just need different resources, or different tools, different supports. And so to answer your question, what I understood your question to be is around the privilege conversation, and how do we, if I try to rephrase that statement as a question, what am I really asking people to do when I'm saying to advance equity with your privilege, right? One version. So one, I will say that everything you mentioned, they're all completely intertwined. And if we try to tackle all of them in one shot, we oftentimes will feel overwhelmed, and we oftentimes will be measuring our progress against areas that we don't have influence on. As I mentioned earlier, in the working in the business world, I can be having people, like, I can help improve safety and trust in organizations, and really make sure that people feel very safe and welcome, and they can love their jobs, and we can have all this economic improvement based on the work that we're doing. And that still may not stop a police officer from shooting another unarmed Black man. And so I have to come to grips with that and say, okay, does that mean that my work in that area is invalid? No. If I keep letting that happen, then I'm not going to work in this area. I'm just going to keep struggling in an area that I don't have influence over right now. So this is kind of like answering multiple questions in one shot. I would say, one, if people ask me what can I offer them to do after, is really figure out where you have influence and focus on making a change right then and there. Because the reason I said that policies come later is that we can be waiting on policies forever. But today, right now, I can make sure that I'm adding more safety and trust and belonging in my organization to everybody I communicate with. So let's work on those policies. As I said, policies are helpful. Our practices bring those policies to life. One example of a policy we all abide by, or we're all affected by, is the speed limit here in Miami. How many people actually follow that? We can have policies, it's our practices that bring those policies to life and actually can make the roads safer in that example. So I just wanted to answer like the top question I was answering, what could you do right now? Focus on where you have influence and really start striving to make an impact there and really measure your impact based on where you have influence versus vice versa, like versus like thinking about what you really want to change and not having influence there. So back to the privilege conversation, I think that there's oftentimes people will make privilege a bad thing and make people who have privilege bad people. And we can go through this whole exercise. You can see it in the video if you go watch it that I shared earlier around advancing racial equity. We all have privilege. And we studied, for example, Martin Luther King and kind of list out all the privileges that he had even as a Black man who was struggling at the time. It was very interesting to say that we all have privilege, and I'm less concerned about I also want to break apart privilege into different layers. For example, stolen privilege, earned privilege, and given privilege. Like we can break it down if you want to break it down. But the point is, we all have some version of privilege, and if we combine privilege with our area of influence, then we all have the ability to advance equity in some aspect of our lives. And so when we're saying to advance equity with your privilege, we want to take the tension or the toxicity out of the word privilege and say you actually need privilege to make some of these conversations happen. And it's wanting to raise up all voices who are here to be champions of change, and making sure that if people are in the same rooms, especially when they're in the same organizations, that we are not pushing away people who can help make change, and making sure that we're honoring all those who are stepping up to advance this conversation. So I think that's probably like the shortest answer I can give you in this conversation. But I appreciate you pointing out a lot of things in one take to make sure that we are very clear with our words. With the short version is that we all have privilege, and we can use that privilege to advance this conversation towards a more equitable world.
Thank you, Kemy. Thank you. Thank you, Chloe, also for the thoughtful questions and comments. We appreciate it. I think there's a comment in the chat, but also Emmanuel, how do I say your name correctly?
I think you said it right. Emmanuel is fine. Emmanuel is also good.
Emmanuel, okay. I saw your hand raised for a while there, so I want to make sure we get to you and then we'll go to the chat.
Sure, thank you. Great discussion. I think a lot of information is very powerful. I have a question in regards to, I think we addressed equity, and we addressed privilege, right? I wanted to know to some of the panelists, how would you like, because I think the same way that individuals can use our privilege, right? I think companies can do the same as well, right? We really believe that social entrepreneurship provides a pathway for individuals to own some of the solutions and causes that we care about. So what are some ways that you think, especially right now in Miami, we know that it's a unique time, right? For our city, a lot of companies are coming in, as well as in-house companies that are growing. How do you think companies can help create, right, to Chloe's point, can be that ladder, and to your point, use their privilege to help more people get equity?
Sorry, who was the question for? Was it for everyone? Sorry, no, I imagine it's for everyone. Was it to the board, or was it to like Kemy and I, or?
Yeah, well, right, to the board. I mean, I know that you had an input on that as well as Kemy. So yes, feel free.
Okay, really quickly, I do some work with Startup F.E.A.R.S and some community-based organizations like that push forward different social entrepreneurship initiatives. And I think the biggest thing I've learned from any of those things combined with my time in nonprofit is ask the community, ask the demographics for their areas of need, like find someone actually there. And I think it's really well-meaning and usually very well-intentioned. You show up with like a product or an initiative or a course or whatever, and you're like, this is gonna help everybody, except no one asked for it, or it's not as accessible as you think it might be, or it actually opens up more doors to more challenges that sort of just demonstrate the layered inequity that those people already experience. It might be really dissuasive to whoever it is you're trying to help, no matter what the community or demographic is. So I would say do your Googles first for a social entrepreneurship initiative, and then figure out how to best implement that based on the needs of the maybe culture of the community that you want to serve. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else has thoughts or anything to add? You don't have to. I'm just checking in before I move on. I also want to acknowledge Natalia's post in the chat talking about thinking about inequity in Colombia and what's happening in Colombia right now, and the fact that it was Mother's Day and like moms are looking for their children, their sons specifically. And so looking at police brutality, I think, Natalia, in the point you're making is also that some of these issues, many of these issues, which is the whole point of global learning, are happening in our local and global communities, right? So when we talk about police brutality in the United States, it's also a phenomenon that happens in other countries that takes other forms, right? Or that might have different impact in different populations, but some of the lessons to be learned, I think, can be applied, or some of the strategies can be applicable to other contexts. And I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you feel that participating in conversations like this helps you feel like you're doing something, and that even if it's not, even if you wanted to be there back in your country of birth, that at least you can bring about change in this community. And then Chloe, you want to share something else, or do you want? Oh, I believe that the systemic pathways that have led to race, socioeconomic privileges are tainted rather than the state of being so. So thank you for your words, Mr. Joseph. And thank you, Rozeena, for allowing the space for my question. Okay, so Chloe's just thanking everybody, and we're just so thankful for her thoughts as well. Anything else? It's 3:28. I love that we are being respectful of everybody's time, but if you have any final thoughts, questions, comments, I think I'm just gonna drop my email in the chat. If people have questions, I invite you all to follow up with the programs that Rozeena mentioned from her office, and follow up with Kemy's links, and then connect with our students with the GEO student board, because I was really thankful for Chloe's comment on the video, and the whole point is that the more comments we get, the more feedback we can put into, or the students. I keep saying we because I work with them, but it's the students' work. So they can kind of play around and produce a strong product to be able to introduce in the school system, because we would hate to then produce something that would perpetuate some, more inequities or leave people out. So we thank you all. I think Melanie just dropped the email for the board if you want to get involved in this project for the next academic year. Otherwise, any final comments or thoughts? We're good?
I don't think I ever answered the question about what you can do right now. Well, obviously, I'm going to plug my office, get involved with my office, but more specifically than that, there are so many resources at your disposal right now in this time of your life as a student. I would encourage you super strongly to use all of them humanly accessible to you, because there are just millions of dollars that we pour into this experience that we craft around you. And it's so important that you just try and troubleshoot a lot of these things now, so that if these are passionate areas for you and you want to go on to become a Kemy, then you kind of have a wealth of practice, and you understand the systems. You kind of maybe already have a foot in that network, maybe a toe. And if you could start from now, it's going to catapult you wild if you already kind of know what you're talking about, or even have an idea of what your questions are. Just start now, figure out a way to get involved. I'm sure there's somebody doing something in your area of interest. And even if they're not doing it the way that you want to, or the way that you envision action being taken, learning why not to or how not to is just as important as learning how to. Yeah, if I've learned anything.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that closing remark, because you learn so much from the things that go well, and you also learn from you learn what not to do, what you don't like. I always tell my students that, so I appreciate you bringing that up. It's 3:31. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope we can have more conversations like this one. I appreciate the panelists' time and all of you, the audience, for staying. And I think we'll see you around. Have a great afternoon.